You're listening to Secrets for Scaling, a Gecko Board podcast that explores the growth secrets of successful founders and CEOs. For this episode, we spoke with Lawrence Hester, co-founder and CEO of FareHarbor, online booking software and support for tours and activities. Hi, Lawrence. Welcome to Secrets for Scaling.
Thank you for having me. Super excited to be here.
Super excited to have you. To jump right in, can you tell us a bit about what FareHarbor is for those who might not be familiar, who your customers are, and what your business model is?
So FareHarbor is reservation software for tour and activity companies. I like to think about our software as the first thing that our clients do when they show up at work is log into our platform so they can manage their entire day-to-day. To give you a good idea about our client mix, ranges from walking tours, food tours, Segway tours, boat tours, to snow tubing and bus tours, you name it. Clients do anything from sell seats on a six-pack boat tour to bus tours doing $100 million a year in annual sales. In terms of our business model, we're a little bit different than the traditional SaaS software, actually a transaction-based model. And the way we operate is that we charge people a booking fee when they book online direct with our clients. And that fee ranges between 6 and 10%. And then the only fee our clients pay is a credit card fee when they take a credit card booking. Otherwise, the software is completely free to use.
And how big is FareHarbor now in terms of both team size and traction?
So we have 135 people spread across the United States from Boston to Hawaii, 3,500 plus customers around the United States and in 12 different countries. This year, we're on pace to process roughly $3 billion in total ticket sales and generate just over $50 million in revenue.
Wow, congrats. It's huge.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been quite the ride.
Today, how is the FareHarbor team structured? What approach do you take to hierarchy and collaboration?
Yeah, we have a very much flat management structure at the top. Other than major product decisions around what we're going to build next, it's very rare for an event or decision to affect more than one area of the organization. In those cases, we'll have an all-management meeting. Otherwise, there's really an expectation that individual managers are actively working with each other to improve processes and client experience. For instance, sales and onboarding are supposed to be working together to help clients get on our platform and be happier when they join our platform. And so from an upper level management perspective, my role is more of a referee. Each group really understands our common goals, onboard more clients, improve client satisfaction, etc. But I really step in when there's conflict. Otherwise, it's almost like the wild, wild west over here, where there's an expectation that everybody's working towards the common goal, towards improving our client experience, etc. And so it really is very much a flat organization. And then once we get past individual team managers, it's flat all the way through the rest of the group.
At what point did you bring on team managers in the journey?
So we brought on team managers at about 35, 40 people. That was the time when we finally had to start specializing within the organization. Before then, there was an expectation that a lot of people were generalists. You might be hired to be a salesperson, but you're probably doing account management on the side or on your weekends. For our onboarding team, you might have been hired for onboarding, but you're really helping in support, etc. And after about 35, 40 people, we started to understand that people having more defined roles and responsibilities is going to be a lot more effective going forward. And that's when we split up the group.
Why do you think it's more effective at that point? Because I've heard other founders say that before. That's a 30-person mark. What is it about that stage that makes specialization so important?
I think in terms of being able to check in on how people are doing, as an employee, you really want to understand what your role is within the organization and have some sort of metric on how you're doing versus your peers or overall. And up until that 30 mark, the organization is so small that you're actively working with everybody from the CEO down. You sort of understand how you fit within the organization. After that point, it becomes a lot more blurry, is in terms of, who you're reporting to and what you're supposed to be doing. And I think that's why we ended up segmenting everybody, was people are a lot happier when there are clear expectations for what they're supposed to be doing and focusing on every day.
How did you manage that process to go from generalist to specialist with the team?
That was a little bit rough. It was definitely a tough transition. So there were a lot of the roles in the organization that were in that generalist category. It was tough to identify who was going to excel at what. We had some metrics around how well they did as an onboarder or support agent, etc. And it was very scary to move people around to specialized roles. I think we honestly did it in the middle of the night. We got together different managers and said, tomorrow is the day. We're jumping off the cliff and we're going to sit people down and tell them they're going to be in certain positions. The challenging part actually thereafter wasn't so much people understanding that I'm an onboarder or I'm an account executive or I work in sales. It was more that they were hanging on to those old tasks. And so it actually took a lot of work for us to train the sales team that they were no longer sales and account management, that they had more of a specialized function. That was the real challenge, to tell you the truth.
Based on that experience, do you have any tips for founders going through a similar thing who's trying to help their employees switch off those tasks while also keep them engaged and happy?
Yeah, number one, it's scary, but eventually you're going to have to do it. So just bite the bullet and understand that's just the part of the normal progression of business. And number two, really check in with people the following weeks, months, year to make sure they're happy. We seem to have a lot of revolving desks around here at FareHarbor where people are still actively moving from one group to the next. Some of those are the people that were here pre that 30 mark before we specialized. And so I really think one of the most important things you can do after you've set people in roles is explain to them why you're doing it, how it's going to help them, how it's going to improve the organization, and then more importantly, just regularly check in with them to make sure they're happy in their new seat. Maybe ask what part of their new job they don't like in terms of specialization and what they're really missing.
So you kind of let people change their roles till they find what fits for them?
We do, as long as we can still get our job done.
Right.
So you can't walk in today and say you'd like to switch out of support into onboarding. But if that's something you'd like to do, we'll make sure it can happen. But it's, we have too much going on at this point to just try and fill holes regularly. And so we'll actively help people move from one position to another as long as we have a little bit of a heads up.
How do you keep your team members focused on their individual goals and metrics?
So I've spoken about KPIs here a lot. We've gone from KPI focus to no KPIs, back to KPIs, and then off of KPIs altogether. And now we're in the swing back towards KPIs. I think one of the difficulties when you're scaling up a business is what's important is constantly changing. While there might be the one goal that the organization's continually working towards, what individual people are working on and how that contributes to the overall company's performance is constantly changing. And so one of the things we've really thought is, how do we institute KPIs that are going to allow people to really focus on what's important in driving the organization forward without necessarily changing those every other week? We've sort of come to now, and each group here has a slightly different goals, is that about once a month we'll reevaluate how KPIs play within the organization and how they're actually helping people grow professionally and then overall, move the organization forward. But it's been tough. I think with seats moving around so much and things changing so rapidly, it's really been difficult to figure out what it is that we should be measuring. At this point, we've really started to have the conversation with the employees around, hey, we'll have KPIs so you know how you're doing, but you need to understand that those are going to have to be flexible, and we might institute a KPI tomorrow, but in a month realize that really wasn't that important and didn't really help you grow, and we're going to be changing that out.
I'd imagine that hiring plays a big role in here and being able to identify people who are going to be comfortable with that.
Absolutely. One of the things we've done, it was actually last year at this time, was we signed up for one of those personality test companies. We use Culture Index. I don't think we realized how important it was that personalities fit certain seats, and it's really not something you can get out of an interview necessarily. As our consultant at this shop, Culture Index, says, there's no bad personality. There are just bad fits for certain personalities. And that's something we've really come to understand over the past year. It also helped that it was 3 years in that we finally did this personality test, and we could look backwards over people's career progression at FareHarbor and apply their personality to places that didn't seem to work out or really worked out well.
When you're facing the challenge of keeping your team focused, are there any places that you turn to for help in that area?
To be honest, it's we probably have the least amount of outside advice that I think any company has really ever had. We're all learning here on our own. From a advice standpoint, it's really, as a group, the management teams getting together and talking about what's working within each one of their teams and how that can be applied to other areas. Going back to the account management manager talking to the gentleman running our sales team to figure out what's working from a motivation standpoint, what hasn't been working. That's sort of how we've done things to date.
And it seems to be working.
So far.
Yeah. So FareHarbor has been recognized for its outstanding culture, which is often a reflection of the company's founders. But we all know even the best founders can struggle with building that foundation, that cultural foundation. What did you do to initially build such a great culture and keep it going throughout the years?
Yeah, to be honest, I think in a lot of ways we just got very lucky. And I mean that in the sense that we sort of fell into our culture. So from the very beginning, FareHarbor's mantra has been DWIFT, do whatever it fucking takes, and Ohana, which means family in Hawaiian. And that was started in the early days when it was my brother and I and our first 3 developers, and a lot of the software just couldn't match our clients' expectations and needs. And so my brother and I filled a lot of those gaps manually, and that became the DWIFT mentality. And then because we started in Hawaii, we've always had this aloha, island rule, island feel, where our clients and our employees are really treated as family. And so I think we've managed to hold on to that from the beginning until now, because it's sort of an example at the top and it all flows down. I think the management team at FareHarbor really is the group that's working the hardest. It's almost like reverse FaceTime. My first job out of college, I worked at Credit Suisse, and it was all about FaceTime, where the young people had to be the ones that were first in and last out of the office. I think actually at FareHarbor, it's the management team is first in and last out on most days. And so it's been leading by example and culture by example.
You've written a bit about how it's been difficult to let go of your individual responsibilities, especially as you hire managers and everything. How do you manage that process, letting go of things like talking with clients, for example?
Yeah, that was really hard. I sort of look back to my high school days in terms of what made it hard. Back in high school, I was one of those people that was just a terrible team player when it came to group homework projects. I'd just take the whole project home and complete it myself. And you can imagine with a mentality like that, it made it really hard to let go. And so what I've learned over the past few years is everybody always talks about hire people that are better than you and smarter than you. And that's what we finally have really gotten to. And that's what's made letting go a lot easier. I know the woman running our account management team has an outstanding perception of the client needs and is just incredible talking to clients in both good and bad situations. So I really know that no matter what, she's going to do a better job than I could do in any situation in the account management world, especially when it comes to training new employees. And so that's made letting go a lot easier. I think the scarier thing in terms of letting go is really not knowing everything that's going on. When you're first starting out, you are customer support and you are onboarding. You're sitting with your product team. You're doing the sales calls. You know what's happening across the organization and how things need to change. As the company's scaled up and added more heads, you're starting to get a filter in terms of what information is flowing to you. And I think I spend a lot of my day out talking to people that are working here to really figure out what is going on, because I know not everything's going to end up on my desk. And that's been the hardest part about letting go. When I think about not calling clients anymore, that's been difficult because I'm no longer hearing those complaints or, praise or whatever. And, that's difficult as a leader because you feel like your finger's not on the pulse as much and you're a degree of separation from what's really happening day to day.
And it sounds like, so your solution has been just more communication and talking to your team members.
Yeah, more communication. And, going back to the whole lucky thing. So we are a family business. My father runs our business development team. That guy probably puts in 120 hours a week, if I had to guess. But every Saturday morning at about 6 a.m. Denver time, I get a report that he's decided to put together over the past few years that really gives me a lot of insight into how each group within FareHarbor is performing.
It sounds like you all work a lot. And you're based in beautiful places like Colorado and Hawaii. Would you say that you balance work and life as a founder?
I'd say I finally have gotten closer to balancing work and life. So I have this really funny chart that I posted a couple years ago that was my weight versus the number of employees at FareHarbor. So when we started FareHarbor, I weighed 172 pounds. I just come off running a under 7-minute half marathon. I was in probably the best shape of my life. And within a year and a half, I'd gained 25 pounds or more. Probably not all muscle. And I really was, we were working all the time. I was living in Hawaii and I was probably the palest person on all of the islands because I just didn't see the sun enough. And we've started to understand that that's just not a long-term solution, not just from a management perspective, but all the way down through the organization. The thing about FareHarbor is we haven't taken venture capital. And because of that, there were times when our team was only 15 people. It really needed to do the work of 90 people. When it was 30 people, it still needed to do the work of 90 people because back then we couldn't afford to overhire. And so there was a little bit less, I'd say, emphasis on work-life balance. It was more about work balance and making sure we could hit all our goals. Now that we're in a much different spot and the organization scaled, we've come to the understanding that for us to be successful, we need people to be really happy at work. They're a lot more productive when they're happy. I'm more productive when I'm happy. And so that means not burning the candle at both ends at all points. And so living in these places like Hawaii and Colorado, I think our team has really embodied that as well. San Francisco, I think our developers actually go surfing every single morning for a few hours, and that's okay. And that's something that should actually be encouraged, is for people to get out and enjoy their environments. The office here in Denver, this past summer we had an event where one of our competitors went out of business, and everybody stepped up. Everybody skipped. 90% of the staff actually skipped the 4th of July weekend to help us work, to help us onboard new accounts. And I think the average person probably slept an hour a night for that entire week. There are opportunities and times when we're all going to need to step up as an organization and pull an all-nighter. Those aren't that often anymore, but on the rare occasion, I think what's been really cool has been to watch our team step up when we need them to step up, but also understanding that as we've grown and we've all gotten a little bit older, that it's really okay and should be encouraged for people to take vacations and to get outside and to enjoy their life. FareHarbor shouldn't be all people are ever doing. That's just really not sustainable. And quite honestly, the whole point of getting involved in FareHarbor and us starting it is about having fun. Because otherwise, really, what's the point?
Well said. I know a lot of our listeners probably haven't reached quite the level of success that FareHarbor has. They're still in that either bootstrapping mode or have a lot of investor pressure. They're in that 30 to 50 people range. Mm-hmm. Do you think the early days is just a matter of sucking it up, kind of not having that balance? Or do you think if you were to go back, would you do it differently?
I think looking back, when I talk about gaining all that weight and just not seeing outside, I think I could probably have afforded to go surfing once a day for an hour. I don't think our trajectory would have changed. It's scary, though, to think that when you're in that seat at that time, that you shouldn't be doing anything and everything at every minute of the day to move the organization forward. And so that would be one of my pieces of advice to myself looking back is, hey, you can afford to take an hour off a day. The world isn't going to end. Nothing's going to change. It will be okay. At the same time, there's definitely, I'd say, part of that suck it up. It is what it is. It's probably true. I think looking back, those first few years, it was, part of the reason we've gotten to where we are is we really were working 7 days a week and everybody was working 7 days a week. And we didn't take vacations for that first year or two. So there's definitely some element of suck it up, but I don't think it needs to be 24/7, 365. You can take an hour off a day. It's not that big a deal. And I can understand that pressure, though, externally is when you have people that are invested in what you're doing, you don't want to let them down. And you really feel like you need to be showing them that you're 110% committed, that this is all you ever think about and do. But you deserve to take a little bit of time off. And ultimately, you'll probably be more productive and better off if you take a little brain break anyway.
Sounds like everyone just needs to take that hour initially and see that no one dies. Nothing goes terribly wrong.
It's hard to do. Yeah, it's hard to do.
So now that FareHarbor is nearly 5 years old, is there any other pieces of advice you'd give to founders who are just beginning a Scalar business?
Yeah, one thing I always think about is before I started FareHarbor, I actually attempted to start a crouton company. Croutons for salads. Looking back, I don't know what I was doing, but I'd say that really before you step up and put the pedal on the gas and go for it, just make sure you love what you do. Because when I think back to my crouton days, anytime there was a setback, it's that much harder if you're not absolutely passionate about what you're doing. You already have enough struggles and things to accomplish and overcome. To have to overcome your own lack of passion or lack of love just makes it that much harder. So absolutely make sure this is something you're committed to. And I'd say the other thing is be patient. With the world of TechCrunch and the tech business news these days, there's this expectation out there that you should be growing 1,000,000% year over year, and if you don't have $50 million that you've raised, you're a failure, or you haven't hired 1,000 people, you're just not doing great things. And success doesn't come overnight. So just breathe and understand that it's a process. It takes time. I've been fortunate enough to talk to a lot of startups in the Denver area recently. And one of the things they're always talking about is there's this unending pressure to grow your business week over week. And looking back, I remember that same feeling. We thought, oh my gosh, we onboarded 2 clients this week. We need to be onboarding 4 clients the next week. Growth isn't necessarily exponential all the time. And so just understand that it does take time and be patient. It will happen as long as you're working hard and committed.
It's a great piece of advice. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us.
For sure. Appreciate it. It was great.
Thank you for listening to Gecko Board's Secrets for Scaling podcast. If you know of someone who you think would be a great guest for Secrets for Scaling, or if you want to share your own scaling story, email me anytime at shannon@geckoboard.com, and we'd love to have you. If you've been enjoying Secrets for Scaling, please consider giving us a review on iTunes. We'd appreciate it.